Meeting is now live streaming. Okay. Wait, let me make sure I'm all good. I think this is all happening. Oh my God, Dr. Myiesha Taylor.
I know, right?
Insanity. It's happening. We're here. Okay, let's okay, great. So I'm super excited to have let me plug my I don't want y'all to hear planes all day. Sorry. Plug these in. Give me 1 second. Okay. So I am super excited because we have Dr. Myiesha Taylor back. And last week we spoke about homeschooling. I know that it was a technical difficulty on my end. I could not figure this out, but Team Sugaberry figured it out this week. So I'm super excited to have, Dr. Taylor on, who is, I believe, an expert on homeschooling. Her daughter is in her second year of law school, and she's 16 years old. And so that's just amazing on its own. But I just wanted people to get the tools if they thought of maybe, we're in a situation right now where schools are closed or people don't feel safe going back and starting to take education in their own hands and what that looks like from a homeschooling point of view. And I wanted to kind of briefly go over what we spoke about last week, right? Like the ABCs of homeschooling, what it is. It's not schooling from the perspective of public school, but it's really creating your own curriculum, right? But also following the guidelines of every state, right? And so do you want to just go over some of those quick ABCs? And then I wanted to kind of focus on like implementation. If somebody was thinking of doing this, or some people might have just started doing this, and how to further the process and really execute it well. So
Absolutely. So, last time, like we discussed, you really want to start off with a network. You want to get all your little duckies in a row in terms of your support system. Anytime you do anything, but homeschooling is no exception. So you want to join those mom groups, those parenting groups, local groups, any ideas that you may have about how you want your homeschool to look, find those groups. If it affirms, your culture, find those groups. There's groups for everything. Then you want to see what's legal and allowable in your state. And there's great resources on that. Homeschooling Legal Defense Association has a website where you can kind of click through and see exactly what's required in your state. And different states have different things. Like in Texas, basically you just pull your kid out of school. You don't even really have to notify anyone, but it's helpful so that they don't send people out to do a wellness check or something like that. So you just let them
scare
know.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you do that. And then I think that the next best step after you find out what you are allowed to do, what you're required to do, and getting your support system together is to kind of sit back and really kind of pontificate your goals for your child and for your homeschool and for yourself. So if your child wants to, let's say, go to medical school, your homeschool is going to look a little bit different than if your child wants to start a business or wants to go to the military or do a trade. So you want to start with the end in mind, or as well as you can plan, right? Because you have the best laid plans, and then it changes in a week or a month, depending, because children grow and change. But in my mind, college was always something that was a goal for my kids, for me, for my kids. And thankfully they didn't reject that. So I started with that goal in mind, and then I worked backwards. So I went to the local college's website, saw what was required on my high school transcript. So if they have to have a foreign language, I made it my business to add that to their curriculum so that they would meet that requirement for the colleges that I was interested in sending them to, or they were interested in going to. So I think those are the kind of three basic things we kind of covered last time. Just kind of getting started, this big picture, this broad view of ideology of homeschooling.
And I think, even for me, like, I'm like, God, I can't imagine, like, do I need to, if you're a working parent and you're like, how do you balance that? Does one, if you're a person who's single, but like wants this idea of like wow, single with a child, you know, raising a kid by yourself, or like, is it possible? You know, like, what does the structure look like? How like, do you have to know? Like, I know I know where I'm strong and I know where I'm weak. I can read very well and I can comprehend and critically think, but math is not my, you know, I know adding and subtraction and multiplication and dividing, but like, if I had to teach algebra all over again, or like calculus 1, 2, like all, I'm like, so how does that, for people who are like, do I need to know everything?
Right.
You know, how do they implement those things?
You don't need to know everything, and you're not going to know everything. So you have to utilize your village, right? So you look for resources. So right now we're a little limited because of COVID. So that, you know, I mentioned, you know, crisis homeschooling is not exactly the same, or actually it's not even really similar to homeschooling when you have an opportunity to plan. Typically, when you are a homeschooling parent, you're looking at resources in February, classes, online classes, maybe securing tutors and homeschool classes in person in February for an August start date, kind of akin to if you are looking for a private school for your kid, or even public school when they do the kindergarten roundup, and you know your kid is starting kindergarten in the fall, they'll have some open houses and some acquisitions and whatnot in February, March, you know, before the end of the school year, before the start of exams and before spring break usually. So you would still do that as a homeschooling mom. And so there's a lot of great resources on the internet. It's not as ideal sometimes as having somebody in front of you, but it is what we have now. And if you do those online programs, it's a lot safer to bring in one individual teacher or tutor. It could even be like a college student that's home for, you know, COVID. Right. And they can come and you can pay them, you know, to come a couple of times a week and just kind of help your child work through what they're learning online. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It does cost some money. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do it. I guess that's my point. You don't have to. Okay. I'm trying to basically take off the veil of homeschooling, because it sounds scary at first, because you're like, first of all, we all, I think, learn as a mother. I'm like, I'm a teacher in a certain sense, but like certain things I'm just like, ooh, child, you know. So that, I think that's a concern, you know, and if you're working and if you're doing all these things, but and I also love what you said last week, where you said, you know, when people are in school, there's only a certain amount of hours that they're actually learning. Right.
You know, and I thought that was really interesting, because I remember seeing something that in Europe, it's like a concentrated amount of hours that they actually learn. And then the rest of the day is just like whatever that is, whether it's museums or interactive or experience. But I was just interested in that, like the hours of the day of actually functionally learning.
Yeah. And it's very small. Like I have it in the book someplace, but I want to say it's maybe about 30 minutes, 40 minutes a day of instruction in math and language arts. And then at the high school level, it's 18 days of instruction in a singular topic. So then that's 18 8-hour days. So that's if you took a whole day to do it, but that's still not a lot, right? And so we kind of divide it up. And then when you think about instruction in a group setting, any group setting, it doesn't even matter really how small the group is, but of course, the larger, the more this applies. They're not going to be addressing your specific issue. You know, they're going to be addressing common issues in the group. And so if you're a school teacher, you're going to be teaching to the middle bottom. Otherwise, you're leaving half your class behind. So if you're in the top half, there's a lot of time where you're actually getting formal instruction and things you already know. So if you take that out of the time too, that 40 minutes, those 18 days, you can see that your child is not getting necessarily a ton of instruction. And I think that one of the things that we've done in our society, which is fine and understandable, is we've made public school, kind of like this community, the center of our community, right? That's how kids eat. Sometimes that's how they get their dental treatments. That's how they get, you know, their physical exams, sometimes school nurse and their special needs. Instead of utilizing health insurance for, let's say, I don't know, speech therapy, they may get it through the school district. And so it's a big loss for a lot of people to have that asset not there. And I get that, but like we said last time, if you expand and realize that a lot of these same resources are still available, they're just not concentrated in school. You then you feel more empowered to try to find those resources. So if your child maybe needs speech therapy, or they have autism and they have other special needs, perhaps health insurance will cover some of that, right? That's something that we never even explored necessarily, because we didn't have to, because the kid is at school and they offer it at school, and that's where we get it. So I think that if you reimagine what school can be, or what it has to be now, then it allows you to have a little bit more freedom to be creative.
And I think it was interesting also, like I saw, an interview with your daughter, who said, she wanted to get in some advanced placement classes and her school wasn't allowing her to do that, right? So I think there's like a twofold here. It's like, there are a lot of people who learn differently than others, right? That sometimes schools can't tailor around that person, right? And then there's also like, I feel like I belong in these advanced placement classes. What is the threshold of why I can't get in it? And why aren't you allowing somebody who looks like me in them? Right. And how does that even work? How do you place certain people? Because I remember being young, I'm talking like elementary school, and knowing who was considered the smart kids and who wasn't. Yeah. And I was pretty average, but I didn't even have the chance to like stretch it to say, and I remember raising my hand all the time, wanting to be part of that group. But you saw the separation, and you saw who got treated differently. And then literally that same group of people went to all the AP classes, and you saw the pipeline, right? So I'm just interested in how the story of your daughter saying, I want to be in advanced placement classes in public, when she was in a public school and they weren't allowing that. And then two, like really carving out a space for different learners in this implementation of homeschooling and how that works.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I mean, Haley, she describes it as like you're watching a video on the computer, and it just buffers and buffers and buffers. Wow. And then maybe a movie you've seen before, and now you're forced to watch it again. It's a movie that was a little bit boring, or you're over it. And now you have to watch it again, and it's third grade, and I'm watching the same movie that I watched in second grade. And to make it worse, it's buffering and buffering and buffering, because I have to for everybody else. And the reason why that resonates is because I think that we can all kind of understand the sentiment, right? Like just like sitting in traffic, I just want to get to where I want to go. And I know, I'll speak for myself, I'll get off the freeway and get on the streets, and I know it's going to take me longer to get to my destination, and I should just sit in the traffic, right?
Yeah.
I've been parallel with the freeway, and I'll see the truck that I was behind, like up there. And if I would have just stayed on the freeway, I would be further along. But there's something about just moving and doing, and just having a little bit more control over your journey, that you're stuck, behind traffic. And I think that every time I sit in traffic, I think about Haley saying that. And what I saw in Haley was, when she tells the story, she'll say, well, I was more concerned about friends, and I wasn't doing as well in school. And that's not quite true. She was doing fine. I just didn't love the lack of enthusiasm that she had for learning. I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. Look at, the world is so interesting. And she was just trying to call in grades so she can get a B, so she can go and, stay under the radar, so that nobody like called her out for being different, because it's hard to be different when you are in fourth grade or sixth grade, right? It's easier to be different when you're grown, but even then it's hard to be different when you're grown.
Oh my God, yeah.
And our girls to be, I have girls, we talk about girls to be different, and to, I'm not interested in that, and I'm focused on my future. So I saw her kind of like, well, why am I going through all of this stuff, all the AP, honors, SAT, ACT, prep, all the stuff you're having me do to get into a college. So I go to college, and then I do it all again to get into grad school. Like, I don't want my life to be about just school, And so that started to sound a lot like me, that she didn't want to go to college, right? Like, well, I don't want to do all of this. I don't want to go to college. Like, if my life from the age 12 to 18 has to be college prep, then I'm not interested in that. And so I had all these plans, girl. I had all of these plans. I had a whole bulletin board. You had to take the SAT subject test, the AP exams, the dual enroll to credentialize my homeschool transcript. And Haley just flat out rejected it. So I called what she did Bus B. It was like, the alternative, because the first bus was bus A directly to Harvard, right? Like, you know, and
Right.
check all the boxes. And when she rejected that plan, I had to rethink all of my life choices.
Right.
You know,
And you're also a doctor.
Yes, exactly. So how can you not be interested in, you know, science or education in general? So I rethought all of that, and I think that the number one lesson to be learned from my story for viewers is to listen to your child, right? To let them buy in and have input. Now, that doesn't mean let them make decisions, because I mean, we're the parents, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things you're not going to want to do, but I know better. You're going to just do it. We're not going to negotiate everything, but to get their buy-in, and in getting their buy-in, it helps you tailor your homeschool and what you want to do. So if they like Haley wanted to be, she's like, oh, I want to be a model. I'm like, okay, well, we live in Texas. I don't really know how that works. So, you know, so why do you want to be a model? Well, because I want to feel like I want people to see me and I want to matter. I said, okay, well, there's a lot of ways to do that without necessarily honing in on model. That's just he is being popular because she's a young girl in America. I said, but you know, people can actually see you and you can be very important if you're a judge. Right? So, you know, let's broaden that and let me tie her real desire, which is to be a change maker and to matter. And let's change that into something that we can actually do right now. You know, so because you can't be a model in Fort Worth. I mean, I guess you can, but it's a lot more difficult. And I'm from LA, from, you know, Long Beach, Compton. So I'm like, I'm looking around like I don't see a whole lot of that.
Well, I think it's important what you just said too, like really hearing your kids and listening and taking the cues. Because if you're listening, what she said is, I want to be seen and I want to matter. Right. And basically I want to make an impact. And for her, seeing models, you know, in whatever frame they've seen it, they've impacted in some way. And so you were able to transition that, broaden the horizon and say, here's how you can also impact and be seen and all the things that you want to do. So, you know, I think a lot of us were raised in like, you should be seen and not heard. But I think that's obviously transitioning to like, well, what is it that you want, you know, within reason. So, but also like the track of how public school works. I know there is our tracks, and a lot of the times Black kids don't get on these tracks, and it kind of like left behind. So with homeschooling, how is that implemented so that you could be on those tracks, or does it matter in homeschooling?
Yeah, it doesn't matter as much because everything is tailored for your child. So there are some merit badges that if your child can earn them, kind of puts them in that smart kid pile, right? So like there's talent searches, Stanford has one, Duke Tip down here is real big, Hopkins has one. And what that is the child takes an above level exam. So like the PSAT 8-9 or the PSAT or SAT or ACT when they are 12 or 13. So, and if they score a certain score, now they're deemed to be smart. And a lot of people will say, well, labels don't matter, you know, but they do kind of, because when you tell a child or the child is told that they're smart and they're gifted or they're whatever, they kind of start to try to live up to that expectation, right? Like that's like telling a kid that they're good at this sport or this musical instrument. I mean, it motivates them and inspires them to actually live the expectation that they've set for themselves. And how people see you does influence how well you do. And so I think that there is some value in telling your child, you know, you're smart and gifted. And honestly, even if they're not, like, you know, I would still tell my child that you're smart, you're special, and all these things, so that they perform at their highest level. And so when your kid is homeschooled, basically, you're just introducing different materials. And once they, you know, get those multiplication tables, then you're going to division and, you know, ratios and number theory, and you're just increasing it. And before you know it, okay, so now it looks like you're ready for algebra. Let's solve for X. And some of these curricula will introduce that concept way young as well. So it becomes very gray, like what level of math, like is it 5th grade math? Is it 8th grade math? Because it's all like blended, because math is not divided into 5th, 6th, that we do that arbitrarily.
It's just a building block.
Yeah, so just give your kid math. And and hire tutors, do the online classes. One thing may work for one or not the other. And then before you know it, you can have your kid take, like, let's say the CLEP exam. And my son took the CLEP exam. I think he was maybe 11 or 12, college algebra, which is algebra 1 and algebra 2, high school. And I hired a tutor.
At 11 years old.
At 11, because math is math. So, and if you think about it,
wow.
like math. So just keep doing the math. And if you have a one-on-one tutor in math, and you think that you're capable, you think that you're smart, and this is fun because you never feel dumb. Nobody ever thinks your question is bad, and your parents are there, your tutor's there, this person works for your parents. So if you're not listening or you're not doing what you're supposed to do, there's no cruising in the back of the room on your cell phone. Like, it's just
I have to cut in there because, first of all, we're starting to have some questions come in that I want to quickly kind of try to get through. And then also just like the idea, I remember being in math class, you know, when I was maybe middle school or junior high, and just feeling so dumb when the teacher called me up to the board, and the way she sent me back to my seat because it wasn't right. Like, it still kind of hurts to this day. But then I remember going, when I went to like a college, a city college in New York, I had this teacher, Black guy. He was like African. He was so invested in us learning math. I started going, this is fun. Like, why couldn't you have been my teacher? Like, I like math. Like, I can do this. And it was encouraging. And it wasn't one-on-one, but it felt it. It felt like he honed in and he was like, no, you can't. Okay, let's go through it. Like, and really making me feel and believe. So sometimes like these, well, you should be in this, you know, you should be in algebra 2. But if you just say, well, math is math and it's basically a building block, you're basically putting a kind of, boundary on children, right? And what they can and can't do. And you're like, yeah, he's behind. But like, if you kind of took the boundary away and built it like a building block and made people feel like, oh yeah, you got it. You know, I feel like people would grow further and actually like math. Right. I do have a question from Angie B. She said, how do you come up with curriculums? I have middle and high schoolers.
So that's when the support groups are important, so that you know what's available and what's out there, because parents are really good about sharing the nuances of the curriculum. So you can do a lot of research and read about it on their website, but the implementation of that, what does that look like for the mother? Usually it's the mother. So what does that look like for you? Does it require for you to like sit at the computer with your child? Do you have to grade all these papers? Like, does the program grade the papers for you? And then do they have a session that offers explanations about the solutions? Like, and those things are not always clear on the website. So that's when your parenting groups and your circles will be very, very handy.
Okay. And so if you have a small home or whatever, like how do you create the environment so that your homeschoolers can focus and not be on their phones and, you know, just focus on school? And how many hours do you contribute a day to the learning process at home?
Yeah, I think that depending on the age of your kid, right? So typically most homeschoolers will allow their child to work and do whatever they need to around the house, whether it's lay on the floor, on the carpet, or sit on the sofa or at the kitchen table, or as long as they're getting the work done. So when you have littles, they probably won't get the work done. And so the littles you may give them a try. And then when they're not getting the work done because they get distracted, that becomes a learning opportunity so that they can become self-aware that they have this tendency to get distracted. Right. And so they can learn how to control that as they get older. So I think that's a learning opportunity that is allowed. And so basically what I would do is I would have them sit in a place where I can watch them. And I don't have to be right next to them, but I'll like, if I'm on my computer and they're sitting over here and they start like squiggling around, I can say, okay, are you done with the math? Let me see it. Okay, you're not done. That's what I thought. Keep working. Right. And so that's the extent of their assigned places. We did do the whole, this is the classroom, this is the desk and all that, but they never used it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was kind of a little bit of a waste of money, but it made me feel better about my choices.
Yeah. You're like, we tried.
Like, you have a space, you know?
Right. And how many hours do you?
Yeah, so the second question, so when you have littles, it doesn't require much time. And littles like, fourth grade below, lower grammar school, lower elementary, maybe 2 hours. And keep in mind that sometimes it's like, just think about homework. So your kid is in class, they may get a 15-minute lecture about a topic that's new. They may work some problems for another 15 minutes. And maybe the teacher can answer some questions for most of the kids. And then they go home, and the idea is that's where it's reinforced. And that's why they do repetition and homework help and whatnot, right? That's the idea anyway. Mm-hmm. But then the parents end up becoming the second shift teacher. So basically you're kind of combining all of that, where you're doing somebody's doing a 15, maybe 30-minute introduction of a new topic or reinforcement of an old topic. And then the child spends the next, 30 minutes or an hour, reinforcing that. So how much time are you actually either teaching your child, which I do not do, that's not my ministry,
right.
But how much time does somebody teach my kid? It may be 30 minutes. And then my kid may work for another 30 minutes. Or if they keep getting up, they may end up working for another hour because they won't sit down and do it. And they're only on number 5 and it's been 20 minutes. And right. That's a part of the lesson. So it doesn't take that long. It doesn't have to take that long. So I would say 2 hours for the littles. When they get older, up through middle school, maybe 3 to 4 hours. And then high school, it's a whole different game. It depends on, if they're taking a chemistry class and a biology class and, this advanced math. Really, parents are not as involved in that anyway, because I don't know many people who can teach,
chemistry,
the physics, and the language arts. I mean, you have to be very, very well-rounded and have multiple subjects. And I would think in order to teach all of that, right? Because even in high school, it's not one person teaching all of this.
No. Yeah. And so I think for my last question, and to say what we're going to talk about also kind of next week, to hit on, how much do you think homeschooling has put your kids in the situation that they're in now, which is, your daughter's 16 years old in her second year of law school. Your son is what? He's 14. He's 14. And in what?
He's a junior at the University UNT.
At 14 years old.
Yeah, he's doing
okay. Well. So how much is that they have these gifted programs, but also how much do you think homeschooling really helped propel them to not only just to be invested in themselves and their education, but also to advance so rapidly?
Yeah, I think that homeschool allowed that to happen. And that was never, the goal was never to homeschool and then get them in and out of college quickly. That wasn't the goal. It just happened because Haley particularly wanted to go faster. She's like, again, I'm sitting in traffic. Can I just get done? Okay, what boxes do I need to check to get started with my real life so I can start to make this impact in the world outside of being a student? She just doesn't really like all of that. So I think that homeschool allowed her to, when you're in public school, less in private school, but still, it's hard to even skip 1 grade. And 1 grade is pretty traumatic sometimes for a child, right? It's like the crabs in the barrel, or people pick on people that kind of remind them of themselves or whatever,
right.
And so once you skip middle school though, so now you're a 10-year-old in high school, there is none of that social crab barrel pulling down. And the same thing with if you take a second grader and put them in middle school, people are just whatever. So with Haley in law school, her classmates are all very open and helping her. When she was at TWU at 14, people shared notes with her, and she was no competition to them because but if she were a year younger, it would have been more difficult. So I think that homeschooling just kind of allows you to pull out of school what's the important thing about education and just put it on the table for your kid. All the rest of the stuff is extra at school, and sometimes necessary, sometimes not. But right now we don't really have the option of a lot of those resources. So I think this is the perfect time to give it a try, and not necessarily to rush your kid through, because that's not what I feel like I did, but just to let them go at their own pace. I would argue that it doesn't take most people 13 years to learn work of a 12th grader. I think that most people can get through the K through 12 curriculum in less time.
Wow.
There'll be a lot for it, which makes sense because you want to allot enough time to get the majority of people through. And so that means that over half of the people can get done before the 13 years are up, but we hold them there because that's an arbitrary expectation of our society because we need daycare for children. And so I think that we can change that. I think there's an opportunity to change that.
Wow, I love it. Your book, The Homeschool Alternative, if anybody wants to even go further with Dr. Taylor, The Homeschool Alternative, they can go to the website and grab the book. I would love next week to maybe speak to Haley and her experience,
Yes.
and kind of get that out there and what that was like and the difference, because she did go to public school and then the transfer to homeschool. And I'm just grateful that you should. I mean, I feel like even for myself, you've opened up a lot of my ideas and of what public school's great, but you know, for those who feel like that's what it is, and you know, but I don't know, I think you're turning a lot of things on its head, and I think people are even more open now, especially. And so I'm just grateful that we were able to have this conversation, and I can't wait to talk to you again next week. Yes. All right, Dr. Taylor, we will talk. See you next week. Bye.